All right. And we're back. Neal Isaacs, the Raleigh Business Broker. Super excited to bring another show to the Raleigh Business Broker YouTube channel. Today's a special day. I've got Patrick Lange with Business Modification Group. I'm going to interview Patrick about his success. He's a specialty broker. He does HVAC businesses only. And I met Patrick at the most recent IBBA conference in Louisville, Kentucky. And I was fortunate enough to sit in on his presentation. And my phone is ringing. I'm going to silence that. And I was really impressed with Patrick, not only with his success. He sold 23 business units last year, but also the way that he gives back to other brokers. So what I want to talk about with Patrick today, I'm going to welcome Patrick and have him give his own supplementary introduction, but I want to get into, serving business owners, their mindset. And also I want to touch on a little bit of our crazy industry of business brokerage. And we're talking a little bit off before the mics got hot about that. So that's what I'm hoping to accomplish, but who knows where we're going to go in this interview. So with that, Patrick Lange, welcome to the Raleigh Business Broker program. How are you doing today?
Fantastic, Neal. Thank you so much for having me on. It's really a pleasure to be here, and I appreciate all you do. Obviously, giving back to the brokerage community as well through all of your activity in IBBA, doing podcasts like this, sharing information for people. So thank you for that, and thank you for giving me an opportunity to share my story.
Absolutely. Well, speaking of your story, let's start with your history. Give us kind of your introduction. How did you get here?
Yeah, absolutely. So kind of a roundabout way. I my original real life adult job, I owned a financial planning company, and I sold that business around 2007. Started buying small home service businesses. First thing I did was swimming pools, cleaning swimming pools. I'm based in the state of Florida. A lot of pools need to be cleaned. So I traded in a suit and tie. A joke. I traded in a suit and tie for flip flops and a tank top, and ran that business for 5 years.
Yeah.
And I've been buying and selling pool routes along the way. And I was actually at a B&I meeting, and I met a business broker, and I didn't even know what a business broker was. So at a B&I meeting, tells me what he does. And I thought, well, I've been doing that for myself for the last 6 years. I didn't know you could do it for other people. And went out and became a business broker. Unfortunately, he didn't give me a lot of guidance. He said, oh, in the state of Florida, you just need a real estate license. So I went and got a real estate license, knocked on a local Century 21 franchise office and said, I'd like to be a business broker. Can I do that here? They said, sure, come on in. I didn't know I didn't know anything about business brokerage. So the first year was a challenge, to say the least. And after that, it was a learning, an uphill learning curve. But been fortunate that was, I guess, probably 14 years ago.
Yeah.
And 8 years ago, I bought one of my listings, kind of the
siren song of the business broker to buy your listing. Yeah.
Yeah. The thing you're never supposed to do. So I bought a heating and air company, and I ran it for 2 years, and I was still doing brokering and running this business. And I realized that I didn't belong running a heating and air company.
Yeah.
I missed the business brokerage world, and I went to go sell it actually. And I found that there wasn't a lot of information about selling a small heating and air company. And up until then, I'd sold probably a couple hundred businesses by then, bars, restaurants, gas stations, you name it. I sold it, all Main Street businesses. And when I was researching, and I thought, wow, there's nobody who really does this. And so found a version of 20 million and sales for plenty of people to help you do it. We're at $1.5 million in sales. I couldn't find anybody. And so I thought my opportunity. At that point, I decided I'm just going to start heating and air. My son actually ended up buying the business from me. My son runs it today.
Really?
Till a month ago, my office had been his office the last 6 years. And so I go around the business. He gets my advice daily, which I'm sure he doesn't want. But, I'm still in the business from seeing what's taking place.
Yeah.
I started just selling in Florida. Then I got a call in Georgia, then South Carolina, then North Carolina, and then I went nationwide. Yeah. And I've been fortunate the last 6 years, I've sold over 120 heating and air companies.
Congratulations on that. And I love that story. And there are some elements in your story that we hear from a lot of business brokers. I I own a business. I sold it. I didn't know what a business was. That's a part of my story. I was surprised that there wasn't a lot of professionalism. We hear that sometimes from people. I wanted to raise the bar. That's part of my story as well. I wouldn't say there wasn't a lot of professionalism before in my experience, but we do hear a lot of that. People say, I could have done this myself, and they learn how to do it. And I also like you've been on both sides of the fence there with operating your own HVAC. So you can really speak the language of your customer, which I want to get into when we get into marketing a little bit. So I there's no surprise the success that you've enjoyed based on your history. But where I want to start here is with your financial background. I would imagine that you had a better grasp than most on the financials of your business. And so let's talk about kind of general business brokerage stuff. When you have those first conversations with HVAC owners, where do you think their heads at with their financials, right? So do they know what their cash flow is? Like, let's talk about the education of the business broker at those early conversations. And we're having some technical difficulties. Patrick, if you can hear me, we have lost connection. We'll give Patrick a minute to come back online here.
And then when I get a tax return, it looks like a completely different business. And I'm sure you've had that countless times yourself, Neal.
Yeah.
And so people think they know. The reality is they don't.
Yeah. They think they know. They think we lost you a little bit, but you're back. Hopefully our connection will stay connected while we're chatting here. I heard you reference tax returns.
So sorry about that. I'll back up for a second. So I think just like any other industry, and I'm sure you've looked at and had the conversation hundreds of times yourself, is on an initial call, I'll say, what are your sales? What are you doing a year in sales? And how much are you making? What's your net income? And then when I get the tax return, it sounds like we're talking about two different businesses. You know,
you ever ask people what were your sales last year and they say, I don't know?
Yes.
Does that surprise you?
You know, it used to. So I almost think I'm numb to answers that I get now where, you know, somebody would say to me, they're doing $3 million in sales, and I get a tax return that says they did $1.5 million. And I'll say, I thought you were doing 3 million in sales. And they'll say, what? I thought I was too. Maybe it was a couple of years ago I did 3 million in sales. And so I think, you know, especially in the trades I have found, you know, working in heating and air, most business owners, it's kind of the E-Myth story, you know, they're incredible technicians running businesses, and they're not always great business people, and they don't know where to go to get training. Nobody's ever told them. They didn't like their boss. They went and started their own company, and they've been just fumbling their way through it, taking care of people. And that's kind of what draws me to it. It's kind of the blue collar Americana, taking great care of people mentality. And I get to deal with them and that on a daily basis. And they're often just not great business minds.
Yeah. I'll throw that book you mentioned, E-Myth, and E-Myth Revisited. Michael Gerber, I think is his name. That's a great story to kind of translate it for business owners of, are you the business, or do you have a business that you run that runs for you? Work on the business instead of in the business. He kind of coined that term or made it popular. So that's a great reference. But yeah, and you make a valid point. Blue collar, especially, I think these guys and gals have got their head down and they're out turning wrenches, and they may not have a handle on the financial elements of the business. And that's where I was saying, you came into it with a financial background, so you probably had an advantage there. But I have similar conversations with owners where they don't know what cash flow is. And I can say personally, my first business was a tropical fish store, and my accountant would, you know, I was selling Nemo and Dory, and this is a long time ago, but my accountant would say, Neal, you made too much money this year. You owe a lot of taxes. And I'd be like, well, not according to my bank account, because I didn't understand, you know, depreciation and all this, and what a balance sheet was. A lot of people know what a balance sheet is. So yeah, I've always felt our role is a lot of education on that front end. But I think that you probably have a unique way of guiding owners through that, having the financial background and doing the work yourself as an owner.
Yeah, and I think that helped me when I went into business, right?
Yeah.
I can't fix an air conditioner today. So I owned a heating
Yeah.
and air company, couldn't do the work. So I
Yeah.
had to focus on the things that I could do. And it
Yeah.
was, tightening up the numbers, better marketing, better image, better pricing, that kind of stuff
Yeah.
that many owners, they're the ones fixing the air conditioners. So they don't, they work 12, 14 hours a day in the field and then come home and do paperwork at night. And it's not always, at 10 o'clock at night, it's not always the best time or the best solution.
Yeah, and we're having a conversation, or we have conversations with owners all the time, and that is a question we ask, like how much do you contribute to the business? Are you doing hair behind the chair if it's a salon? Are you the lead technician if you were removed from the business? How much would business suffer? Um, and the position you just articulated, which is I'm an administrator. You could take someone else and put them in my chair and the business would operate. I mean, that's what we want to hear as business intermediaries. I find a lot of owners are proud to talk about how they push their business forward, but it's a little counterintuitive to them. Like, no, we don't want you to be working as hard as you're working.
Yeah, well, and that's, the conversation I have. I tell people the hardest business for me to sell is the business when we online at every Google review and your name's the entire Google review. You're the best
Absolutely.
technician, you're the best salesman, you're the best bookkeeper. And at that point, often they don't have a business, they have a high paying job. I mean,
Yeah.
a very great paying job. So I'm not putting that down at all. But if
Yeah.
the ultimate goal is to sell, there's got to be some separation.
Yeah. Well, so we're kind of establishing quality. What's a sellable business? What's a more marketable business? And you mentioned marketing and how you're good at that. I want to spend a little bit of time on that because that was one of the big things I picked up from listening to you. You are a marketer, Patrick. And I think a lot of great business brokers are great marketers. So let's start with your blog. You've been at this a long time. Tell me about kind of how you use your blog. I notice it's got all different modalities of content. You got a blog with some video and you're interviewing other people. Just give me some overview of how you use your blog and what it does for your business.
Yeah, to me, it's education, right? I
Yeah.
mean, the reality is most business owners, once again, before I was a broker, I didn't know what a broker was.
Yeah.
So most business owners don't either. And so in that world, they don't know who to ask. And
Yeah.
I often joke, asking your barber if you need a haircut's not the right answer. And they're often asking a buyer what their business is worth. A buyer's making an offer on their business, and they've never talked to anybody about it. They don't know
Yeah.
who to ask. They don't know. They don't want to call a competitor and say, "Hey, what do you think what should I value my business at?" So we've used the
And
blog.
sorry to interrupt you,
Yeah, go
or
ahead.
asking their CPA. I'm not a huge fan of that either because they can get some erroneous answers there. Respect
Absolutely.
my CPA friends, but please continue.
Yeah, absolutely. I agree 100%. And so to me, I use it as a place to just give out information.
Yeah.
And at some point, if they look for help and I'm the one they choose, fantastic. But if nothing else, and you've had these conversations, the hardest part of my job, in my opinion, is sitting across the table with somebody and telling them their business has no value.
Yeah.
That you spent 30 years of your life working for something and nobody wants it. It rips your heart out to me. I mean, it's just, and so because those people 20 years ago didn't meet somebody like you and I. They
Yeah.
didn't ask somebody what their business is worth. They didn't ask what are buyers looking for because they didn't know to ask. And so I try to get all this information out there from a selfish standpoint so I can stop having those conversations.
Yeah.
Um, because once again, it's the hardest part of my job. And so they don't have to know me. They don't have to come meet with me. They don't have to call me. They can go on my YouTube channel and
Yeah.
watch 60 or 70 videos on selling their heating and air company. They can go to my website and I've probably got 200 articles on buying and selling heating and air companies. And
Yeah.
so it's really to give out information. And at the end of the day, I'm fortunate a lot of the people that look at it, the way I talk, the things I say resonates with them. And when they're ready to sell, they call me, fortunately. But there's a
Yeah.
lot of people who watch it and don't call me, and I'm okay with that. It's just to give out information because nobody knows where to go.
It's clear to me that you have a abundance mentality, that you're going to share information and trust that it's going to come back, and it is coming back. And you're sharing through your blog. You're sharing, this channel is for business owners, for business buyers, and for business brokers. You're sharing with other business brokers, which seems counterintuitive when you get into this game. Like, I'm gonna give away all my secrets, but
Sure.
it's an abundance mindset, and I think you're living proof that it's a great way to operate, because it does come back to you. You sold 23 units last year, and busier than ever. So kudos to you. And how long has that blog been going?
Probably 6 years, I would think. And we started writing one article a month initially, and then it went to 2 articles a month. And then a lot of my articles that are on my blog are also in industry publications. So I write HVAC Insider, HVAC Today, different magazines like that are industry specific. And so now, because of that demand, we typically write 4 articles a month. And so I'm writing almost 50 articles a year.
That's a lot of work, Patrick.
The hard part is thinking, what are we going to write about? You and I do this all day, every day. And so you don't think of what happens. A big thing like in heating and air is maintenance agreements. How are maintenance agreements treated in the sale? And when you do, 120 deals, you don't think that, what about maintenance agreements? But somebody sitting at home in Topeka, Kansas, wanting to sell their heating and air company is thinking, what happens to my maintenance agreement? So every time somebody will ask me a question, I usually have a notepad with me, and I'll write a note down and say, all right, I need to do an article about that, or a video
content
about
opportunity.
it. Yeah, absolutely. And that's really the hardest part, the writing about it. I mean, Neal, you're obviously incredibly smart in the industry, and educated yourself and educate others. And so you've got so much in your mind, it's getting it out for other people to see it, and thinking of that. So that's really the hardest part of the work is doing that.
Yeah. And I'm similar with content. It's, if I hear myself repeating something that I've said enough that I've got an answer, it needs to be recorded, and it needs to be in a format that somebody could find that answer without asking me. I'm happy to tell them, but if we can have those conversations, me to them, without me even being there, so that when we get together, we can get to just talking about what's important to them instead of the technical stuff, all the better. But staying on this marketing piece, the blog translates into much more. You mentioned it. You're in trade magazines, HVAC related. I know that you rank very, very highly on Google. So there's an SEO factor here. And it looks like that was pretty intentional. Can you speak just to how you're getting your name out? I think this applies not just for business brokers, but for any business owner to be successful in marketing.
Yeah, and that was the plan, right? Starting 6 years ago was give information away to be the expert. So when people are looking for information, you're easy to find. If you look up HVAC broker or anything like that, typically I'm dominating the first page. Now, part of that is spent, right? I have an SEO company that's doing it. But at the end of the day, we do it to give the information away and help people, but for 2 other reasons. One, somebody looking to consider selling is going to find me easily, and they're not going to have to work hard to find me. But the second part is to find my clients' listings. So at the end of the day, Neal, we're hired to find the best buyer for somebody's business. And the more buyers, in my opinion, the more buyers we have looking at the opportunity, the better our chances are. And the better the fit can be. So we give all the information out to drive traffic to those listings. And so when people read an article about me and then they search me, they'll come up with 20 listings that I happen to have, or that type of thing. And so there is a method to the madness. And at the end of the day, it's to turn the spotlight onto my clients' listings so we can help them find the right buyer.
Yeah. Client service is the foundation of what you do, and it translates well. I was curious about the name of your company. Is there some SEO involved with that? Because Business Modification Group, how did you come up with that? How does that fit into your marketing play?
And so it doesn't. So I have a branding guy, a guy I know very well that brands all these heating and air companies across the country. And every time I see him at an event, he gives me a very hard time. So when I met the business broker and I was still doing the swimming pool stuff, I was doing some coaching and consulting. We were fortunate. So my first pool route I bought was 26 pools, and it took me a day and a half to do them. By the time I sold, we were cleaning over 400 pools in 5 different counties. So we were fortunate to grow quickly. And many other guys and girls in the industry were struggling with it. And so I was doing some consulting. That's where Business Modification Group came from. So I had that business broker, and and I after 2 years, maybe a little more, corporation here, tired of everything. I'm just gonna stick. And then and now because that's the FCA business left, it probably should be something better seen, but it's not, unfortunately.
Gotcha. And well, a little bit of connection issues, but I did hear most of that answer, and hopefully our viewers did as well. So your business has evolved, and that's where Business Modification Group started. I think it's a good name because, businesses are always evolving, and a lot of times they need to be modified a little bit before they can be sold. But thanks for sharing that about the history of your name there. I think we may be losing you again. I'm going to throw on the screen your LinkedIn. If you haven't already started following Patrick on LinkedIn, it's Patrick Lange Business Broker is the best way to find Patrick there on LinkedIn. And he's on YouTube as well. We've got his YouTube, Patrick Lange 9858. I'll put that in the show notes as well. I am Raleigh Business Broker. You can find me at Raleigh Business Broker on YouTube. And please like and subscribe and share this content. Patrick, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. So I want to pivot a little bit the conversation more into, we'll kind of back a little bit. We talked about both of our impressions when we got into this business and our experience of selling our businesses. And we talked about the financial piece, but I want to get to the reason for sale. Do you find when people first come to you and they'd say, I want to sell my business, and you ask them why, is there ever more behind that? Let's talk about motivations for sale for business owners.
Yeah. The normal ones, I think that we've all faced: brokers, age, health issues. But one of the big problems plaguing the trades, and I think a lot of other industries, is qualified help. Finding labor. And many of these guys and girls are kind of sick of beating their head against the wall.
Yeah.
The phone rings more than they can get to. They don't have enough people on the calls, and they're just frustrated. And other companies are poaching other employees and paying them ridiculous amounts and that kind of thing. And so I think that, that's really been the last 2 years probably has been one of the biggest driving forces in the trades is, they're hiring people, they're training them, and then they're getting taken away by somebody else for $5 more an hour or a shiny truck, and they're sick of fighting it. And they were close to retirement anyways, and they thought, I'm just done. And so that's really been the key driver in the trades, I think.
I'm hearing that too, in the trades especially, but in all things. Ever since COVID, the labor issues I've heard some new rumblings about, like, my debt service is too high with interest rates going up, but I hear more of in restaurants, COGS has gone up, and I know there's a lot of that in HVAC as well. But I think I hear more about the trades putting stress on owners finding qualified labor. So that makes perfect sense. Well, and where do you see that going? Where do you see that trend? Do you think labor is going to get easier to find or harder to find? Where do you see that trend going?
The ones that I see winning the labor are people who are hiring for attitude and training for aptitude, right? They're bringing people in with no industry experience and developing them, giving them a career, giving them education, a track to run on. And those are the ones that I see are winning. But to do that takes time, right? I mean, it doesn't happen overnight, and not everybody makes it. Not everybody stays. So it's a big investment. And that's where, if you're looking at retirement, putting in an educational recruiting and training program that may take months or years to begin to pay for itself, I think is a challenge for some. But the ones that I see that adopted that mentality early, even my son. So there's smaller, not necessarily trade schools, but training programs that kind of that you immerse an employee in. So instead of it taking 6 months or a year to get that training, it can be 3 weeks. And so my son is bringing in younger people, working them to make sure they're good, ethical, honest, the right people, and then sending them to a training school for 3 weeks, 4 weeks, whatever it ends up being, and investing in those employees and giving them an opportunity to better their life. And so that's where the only way I see it getting better. You know, the beauty of heating and air, in my opinion, and why I bought a heating and air company. I'm based in Florida, as I mentioned.
Yeah.
I don't have a husband in the state of Florida dumb enough to tell his wife he's not fixing the air conditioner in the summertime. And it just, I don't see that happening. So I don't think that kind of stuff is going to slow down. And,
Absolutely. Yeah.
And an aging population, there was a lot of incredible tradespeople that in high schools and other, the trades weren't promoted. You know, it's not something that's been preached. And so it's starting to happen better now, but I think it's going to take time for that to happen.
And there's a tie-in here with reasons for sale. And I call it the go or grow dilemma. And that a lot of owners come in and they present themselves and they say, oh, you know, I want to sell. And you say, why? And they may say retirement, but they may, if you scratch that onion, you peel the onion a little bit more, they may say, I just can't find qualified help. And then you present them with the option that you just said, like, are you willing to invest in your business, invest in your people, and give this thing a minimum of a year, maybe 2 years to rebuild your team and to show different numbers? Because realistically, that's what it would take if the number's not where you want it to be. Do you want to grow, or do you just want to go now at the value that it's at? And a lot of owners just don't want to put that time into it. They're done already.
Well, and the market's been strong in the trades, right? There's been a lot of private equity interest. And even if you go to all you hear about crazy multiples that people are paying for businesses. So I think that plays to it as well. Potentially is the market at the peak, the trades, and if there's a time to go, do you go now and cash the check, or potentially wait for the market to slow down a little bit? And you know, your crystal ball works as well as mine does, you know, kind of thing. It's, I don't know what tomorrow's going to bring. We only can do a day. Yeah. And so I think that plays an impact in there as well.
Well, I'm glad you mentioned private equity. I want to go there. I want to talk a little bit about, you know, we're talking about why do business owners sell? What is their reason for sale? Where are their price expectations? I want to look at the other side of the equation now and just talk about business buyers. You've been at this for a while. Just let's start with the different buckets of buyers that you see coming in the door. How do they fit into groups?
Yeah, you know, so it's changed so drastically. My first 2 years, every mom-and-pop company I sold was to another mom-and-pop company. Right? So it was already competing in the space, wanted to expand to the town next to them, and they buy. Then the private equity wave came through, and there's still a lot of big private equity buyers. One company that I deal with has bought 180 companies in the last 4 years. Wow. And that's incredible numbers. And I think that spawned a wave of other people in financial markets seeing that happen. Yeah. And so now we see guys and girls who may have worked for a private equity firm in the past or worked for a big consolidator, now they're doing it themselves. And I also still see the insurance agent who doesn't want to be in insurance anymore and sees the numbers in the trades, or the school teacher whose dad was in the trades years ago and she knew the business and thinks now may be the time for me to get back in and buy a company. So it's crazy the range of buyers that are out there. Each one presents their own unique challenges and opportunities. But certainly it's a wide range. And I used to, back to the marketing kind of section, my marketing used to go just to mom and pops, right? It was mom and pops buying other mom and pops. Well, now the marketing needs to include everybody because we don't know who the buyer is. And I often have a seller say, who do you think is going to buy it? The person that's the best fit with the biggest checkbook. I mean, at the end of the day, you know, I don't know.
That's a part of the conversation we have early with owners as well, because we're helping them understand how this process works. And inevitably they say, who do you think is going to buy my business? And I like having those conversations. So I'll say, who do you think will buy your business? Because they know pretty well what it's going to take. But also I know they may have some bias about who's going to buy their business. And we as intermediaries kind of see the different buyer groups. And I usually frame it like, I don't want to limit any opportunity for you. I want to bring every potential buyer, and then let's see who has the money and the best terms, and then we'll make a decision together. But let's not limit ourselves and say, I'm only going to find this type of buyer, because what if there's somebody else out there? I sold a business to a gentleman he was buying it for his daughter. And during the buyer owner meetings, it was pretty evident that she wasn't going to be very hands-on with this business. She was kind of doing her Instagram thing. But it was important for him to buy this business for his daughter. And that's exactly what happened. And the business did great once they acquired it. But he was buying it for a reason outside of the typical reason why people buy businesses. So you never really know who that buyer is going to be. But it's what you said about private equity coming in, I think, is really interesting as well. Where do you think, Patrick, with private equity, where do you think their appetite for EBITDA is? I mean, is it $1 million? Is it 750? Is it $500,000? Where do you find them getting interest in businesses these days?
All over,
Yeah.
really.
Yeah.
When I first started getting the calls from the private equity, it had to be $1 million. They wouldn't touch anything for $1 million. And then a wave of consolidation came in, and then they start realizing that, hey, there's not many left at $1 million. Maybe 750 is okay. I've sold huge players in the market, companies that are doing $1 million in sales. So all over the place. If it's a strategic, they're already dominating a town and want to go to another part of that town, or they need the employees, or everybody's got a different reason for their purchase. But certainly for most of them, in that $1 million range is where it's going to need to be. But there's so many different buyers out there currently that we have an email distribution list that we send our listings out to. And it used to be $1 million and above. I would have the private equity buyers there, and I send them every deal now because they've bought them. It shocks me. And if everything checks the right box for what they're looking for, they'll buy them.
Yeah, we have a similar format with our buyer list too, where we have the bigger deals and the smaller deals, and we don't send the smaller deals to the private equity. But that's interesting to hear that you're sending them everything now. And what's your experience going back to the seller? It's a different conversation with a private equity group. How does that affect your conversations with your client, the HVAC owner, if we're talking to private equity?
So all over the place, right? So some people don't even have a clue what private equity is.
Yeah.
Others, the big bad wolf, and stay away from them. They've got this built up in their mind of what they've done in the past. There was a great consolidation in heating and air probably 15, 20 years ago, and it didn't go so well. It didn't end real well. And so the people that have been in the business a long time remember those days. So there's some fear and trepidation there. But a lot of these private equity buyers have become better at being human. Obviously you sold a lot of businesses. A lot of private equity people would get on the phone, and it was spreadsheets and numbers, and what about this percentage, and why did you buy paper towels for this cost? I mean, they know the numbers so well that the owners left kind of wondering what in the world's even happening. And there's still some I see in the space like that, but a lot of them, they understand that it's a blue collar business and it's blue collar people, and they're not going to be CPAs that they're talking to when they're going over the numbers. And with the advent of QuickBooks, I mean, most of them now are just requesting backup copies of the QuickBooks, and they can go through and get any number they need, and they're not having to ask the seller for those numbers. So it's gotten better, but I warn them. I say, listen, we could be sitting at a table with 5 Harvard CPAs who have more initials after their name than in their name.
Yeah.
And they're going to ask questions that you're going to wonder, why don't I know this? You're not supposed to know this. You're supposed to run a good company. You've done that your entire life. You've taken care of every little league team in town for the last 30 years. You have great employees, and their families are better because of you. Don't let them asking questions about EBITDA have an impact on what you think you've done with your business, because it doesn't.
Well framed, Patrick. I love especially the quote, act like a human. We were talking about IBBA and M&A Source, which is where the big deal guys are, and the private equity comes to that. And I've heard some of those private equity guys talk like humans, and it's like, okay, these guys aren't so scary after all. They're very particular in what they're looking for, but they can respect what the owner has built and respect that they are coming from, we'll call it a blue collar background. They may not be as immersed in these details of accrual accounting and what have you. So Yeah, there's definitely, I think they probably have gotten a little bit better, as especially you were talking about how they're coming down closer to Main Street businesses. So that's good
Well,
to
I think
hear
they've
they're
had
less
to.
scary.
I think the market's dictated that, right? I mean,
Mhm.
they're competing against 25 other firms who are looking at the same deal,
Yeah,
and coming in and putting the seller down about how they've done something doesn't work very well for them.
yeah,
They could have done that potentially 10 or 15 years ago when they were the only buyer to the table.
yeah,
But now, with people like you and I involved and the marketing machines that we've built and
yeah,
getting all these eyes on the business, now I have a video out, and I've talked about it with my sellers. You don't have to sell to a jerk, right? At the end
yeah,
of the day,
yeah,
this is your legacy. And
yeah.
we do a phone call right away to see if you think they're a good fit for you or not. And if
Chemistry
they're
test.
not,
Yeah,
we tell them thank you. We'll
yeah,
sell it to somebody else. And so that's the beauty, I think, in getting so many eyes on the listings.
yeah.
Is it's not the only buyer coming to the table, and you need to beg them to buy it. It's crazy. I had a client say to me, he said, this sounds a lot like shoe shopping. I thought, "What, lot like shoe
Shoe
shopping?
shopping.
What are you
Yeah,
talking about?" And he said, listen, somebody comes in and the shoe doesn't fit their foot. It doesn't mean it's a bad shoe. It's just not a fit for them. So we have
yeah.
to find the person that it's the right fit for. And I thought, well, I need you to do a video of that for me because that's so true.
That is so true. Yeah, yeah.
It's not a
We're
good,
matchmakers.
yeah,
It's
it's not a
yeah,
good fit. So, yeah. And so I think the market and all of the interest in the space has helped that.
yeah. Well, I was going to tell a story, but I'll give you it very quickly. Recently, we sold a business, $2 million top line and $200,000 cash flow / EBITDA, and we had private equity types interested in it, and they just overcomplicated it. And the first one came and kind of just created a cloud and left. And the next one came in. I said, and they were kind of like wannabe private equity. And they kind of did the same thing. I said, look, the last guy didn't get the deal because they just overcomplicated it. Don't do that. He's like, well, I understand. And sure enough, they come up with all these complicated working capital caps and baskets and blah, 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 blah. And then another guy comes through and he's just like, yeah, I'll buy the business just the way it is. I'll bring my own working capital. I get it. It doesn't have to be complicated. And we went with that guy and it was super easy. And I wondered why these private equity folks were looking at a business that did $200,000. It just seemed too small. But that's kind of where my question came from. Is we're seeing both of them. It's a more complicated deal when private equity is involved, but it doesn't have.
Well, yeah, certainly changing the landscape with working capital and those things.
Yeah,
But
yeah,
the part of that story I love. Imagine if your seller
yeah,
didn't have you there to help them sift and sort through that, right?
yeah, yeah,
The private equity firm contacted them, said we want to buy it. Hocus pocus, here's all the moving parts, and who knows what the check's going to be at the end of the
yeah,
day, because you need a PhD to try to figure out this plus this minus this.
yeah,
And so many people, I think, get worn down, right? They think, well, if that's the way it normally works, this company's bought 200 businesses. I have to trust them. I've never
yeah,
sold a company. And so I think that's just one of the places where somebody like you adds a tremendous amount of value to
yeah,
those people is to say there and say, hey, you don't have to take this. This isn't normal. We don't. We can find somebody else, and I think that in addition to the marketing you did to get them there, right, to get other
absolutely.
buyers there that they wouldn't have been able to do on their own, and that's to me the sweet spot kind of what we do.
Yeah,
It's they could have sold, and I meet people at trade shows all the time. Oh, I sold my business 3 years ago. How'd it go? Not good.
yeah,
Not good. Well, they didn't pay me this, and they didn't do that. I didn't read this. I didn't know about this.
yeah, yeah,
And I'm thinking, man, if you just had somebody, whether it's me or somebody else, somebody in your corner to say you don't have to accept that.
yeah,
And that's where, the story that you're telling is so true, that
yeah,
imagine the heartache you save them, in addition to getting it sold to a good person and all the other stuff, but
yeah.
just what the heck that would have been.
Yeah, we as intermediaries create a competitive marketplace, and we represent our clients to make sure it's the best opportunity for them. And it's more complicated than that once you talk about contracts. But we did find, just to button that story, we did find out later that one of those private equity buyers was in the process, most likely, of them being sold. They had already bought a bunch of stuff. This was going to be the cherry on top. So this was like a bolt on to an add on to a portfolio. And they didn't really need it, but they really wanted it just to make it perfect for whatever other deal they were doing. So that everything was going to get changed after that deal. So client was really happy that it didn't go that way, because it would have been so much change for his employees. But
Oh, absolutely. And you have no control at that point, right? I mean, it's done.
yeah,
There's no do-overs when selling. It's,
no.
it's a permanent decision. And hopefully if done right, you only have to do it one time.
Well, I want to pivot one more time back to HVAC. Thank you for going on that journey about buyers and sellers and groups. But you had mentioned this. I like what you said about the honey-do list. Why do you like the HVAC niche in general?
Well, a couple of reasons, several reasons. One, the people. Most part, I'm a pretty simple guy, and I love the people who built America. I can go into a small town and find a company, been in business for 30 years, been doing an incredible job taking care of people, supporting the little league team, giving people jobs, doing that. To me, I love that, and I love helping keeping legacy going. That's the first thing. Second thing is there's delivering value, for me. So, and this is nothing against any other broker, so it's not meant to sound that way, and so I'll apologize in advance if it does. If I sold a restaurant today, a convenience store tomorrow, and a flower shop the next day, in my own mind, I felt like I couldn't add value to those people. Sure, I could help the deal, and I knew the deal, and I knew the contract, and I knew everything, but I haven't sold a restaurant in 7 years, probably 6 years, something like that.
Yeah.
And the last one I sold, the broker on the other side, and we're in Florida, and we co-broke, so I don't know if we need to talk about that, but so there was another broker involved, and the broker was representing the seller, and I was representing the buyer, and this broker knew he had forgotten more about restaurants than I would have ever known. So he was helping me, saying, "Did you check on the Pepsi lease?" And things I didn't even know to ask. And I thought, at the end of that deal, I thought, I'm doing a disservice to my client. I'm not the best guy suited for that job, because clearly I was so outclassed by this other broker who knew so much more about it that my clients would have been better dealing with him. And actually, my clients called me after that, probably a year later, 2 years later, something like that, and said, "We got another restaurant, want us to help you with it. We want you to help us with it." I'm like, "I'm not your guy. You need to call the last broker who we bought the business from. That's who you need to deal with, because he by far knows way more about it." And they're like, "No, you are a good luck charm." And so anyways, I sent him back there because he was in a better spot to help. And I just feel when somebody comes to me, because I've done so many, because I know the difference between a capacitor and a contactor, and I understand about maintenance agreements, and I understand about the warranties that are associated, I'm able to add more value them into the transaction. So once again, I hope that doesn't sound negative to any other broker. Just for me, that was the way that I felt, and without being arrogant, and I'm being arrogant saying it, I feel there's nobody that knows more about selling a heating and air company than I do, because I've been on both sides of the table, and I've done so many that I'm able to add more value.
I don't think that's arrogant at all. I think that's, we tell our deal partners, kind of stay in your lane. I'll stay in my lane. I'm not going to give accounting advice. I'm not going to give legal advice. And I think what you're saying is similar to that. I'm a specialty HVAC broker. I'm not the best one to sell a restaurant. Let me do my thing and execute at a high level. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think that's really savvy. So,
and I refer them all the way. I get a lot of calls from people that said, "Hey, you did a good job for me. My best friend has a paint store. Can you help them?" And the answer always is no. I'm not the guy.
I was curious about if you're seeing ancillary businesses. I mean, there's, if you look at an ACE code, HVAC is lumped in with plumbing. There's a lot of similar businesses. Do you stray outside of HVAC? How far will you go within your niche?
Yeah, probably 97% of what I do is heating and air, and has been the last 6 years. The other 3% is going to be electrical and plumbing. And we may change. So my youngest son graduates college in 2 weeks, and has worked for me behind the scenes for 4 years in college. And so I think he'll join the firm, and we'll probably, when he gets going, have him take on plumbing or electrical or something else. There's enough business for me just to focus on heating and air, that I don't want to get sidetracked. But I think as a business, we'll probably add another trade just because there's a lot of them now where companies are full service. They're offering plumbing, heating, and air and electrical under one roof. Um, and I've sold some of those,
Yeah.
and I wasn't able to add value on the electrical and plumbing just because I don't do enough of them.
Yeah.
And so by having somebody who does that, I think we'll be able to deliver more value.
And maybe this is backtracking a little bit, but I think I want to mention this. I think I saw a post from you on LinkedIn from 14 years ago, playing t-ball or baseball with your son. My son is 4.5. He's in t-ball right now, and the message was, I thought it was brilliant, is, cherish these moments. They go by really fast. And you were speaking from a personal level, but you were applying it to any business owner and getting people to stop and think about your future, your business's future. I thought it was brilliant. I think it's a wake up message that a lot of people need. And I love the fact that you have a family business. You've involved your son in your business. I love working with family businesses. When I sell family businesses, although there's its own constraints with what's going to happen with kids when the business is sold, it's always great to see that. So I like that you put that out there. And I think that's an important lesson for marketing, that back to what you said about private equity, don't forget to be human.
Yeah. My son thing was baseball, and that's why I was a baseball pitcher. My son played middle school, high school, and college baseball, and literally grew up in the passenger seat of my truck going to baseball tournaments all around the Southeast.
Yeah.
And he's heard more deals on my speakerphone than most people have been a part of, right? So he grew up in the business, and then when he started in college, he was going to college and playing baseball and getting a job was challenging. So I'd have him do my recast for me and do behind the scenes work. And so eventually it's coming there. And the thing when I look back, so we're planning his graduation, and it's like, man, it was yesterday. And somebody had said, don't blink. When my kids were young, I've got 3 kids. My oldest owns the heating and air company that I used to own. And my daughter's doing other good things for herself. And so, the saying, the days are long and the years are short, rings true. And right before I posted that, I met with a seller and I said, what's the reason to sell? And he said, I've been diagnosed with cancer. I'm going to die.
Yeah.
Well,
Wow.
But what have you done to plan for the sale of your business? And he said, nothing. And it was years out. I mean, I wasn't going to sell now.
Yeah.
And I thought, man, maybe we need to do a better job telling people to start planning the sale of their business now, so that if anything happens, that it's ready to be sold, right? I'm sure you see this, and every broker does. Most people are taught to run a business to save taxes, right? At the end of the day, all you're planning in the business is, what can I do to save taxes? And that's the exact opposite of running a business to sell.
Yeah.
You want to show all the profit you can. And so this guy and his wife have been running a business to save taxes.
Yeah.
And so now when I go to market, I'm not going to be able to get them much money.
Yeah.
Had they been running a business to sell, when this horrible news came, they would have been in a much better spot. That we can go to market, it's still tragedy. Money's not going to fix it. And I'm not saying that it will, but knowing that she's going to be taken care of from what they spent the last 25 years building it would have been so much better. And so that was the gist of the post, was with my son, because we were talking about his graduation, and it was just yesterday. But how many business owners have we talked to? You say, how long have you been in business? And like, 25 years. And it was like yesterday. And now they're here, and they haven't done a great job. And so it's so much easier to fix it when you're 50 years old and thinking of selling 10 years down the road than it is at 65 years old and you're planning on selling tomorrow. And you've got to say, hey, you've got to go back and clean up these books for the next 3 years, and you've got to do this for the next 2 years, and you've got to do this. And so I appreciate you saying something about that. It wasn't just a marketing piece. I mean, it really has sentimental for me. Obviously, my youngest is graduating college, and so I'm getting older by the day. It's I look back, and now I've got great kids.
Sometimes this topic of, and we touched on financial clarity earlier in this program, but in an ideal world, you run a business for 10 years and you run it as a lifestyle business for the first 7 years, and then you pivot for the look back period, and you show great clean books for the last 3 years. And I'm not giving tax advice. I'm just saying, if you could do that, you could have both. But the reality is, the story that you just told, COVID could happen. You could get a diagnosis any of those first few years. So maybe you just show that the business is profitable, pay some taxes, and have an option to walk out the door and sell your business at any time, and enjoy the freedom of knowing that you don't even have to run it if you don't want to, because you could sell it at any time, as opposed to, I'm going to have to make some big changes later.
And I preach to people. They always say, what's the best thing I can do to increase the value of my business? My answer is pay taxes, right? Show that you're making profit, and unfortunately pay taxes, which nobody loves, but it is what it is. And a business that you don't need to sell is worth so much more money than a business you have to sell.
And yes, and talk to your financial advisor, because I see a lot of people, they just throw everything into the cost of goods sold, where they could have done a retirement plan, or they could have done some type of 179 deduct. There's other ways to do it. So talk to your financial advisor, CPA, about ways that buyers, brokers, and bankers can see how you make money and prove it. That's going to be the best of both worlds. You can only go so far with that, but better than just throwing the cost of goods sold. Hey, I built a porch on my house. It's in the cost of goods sold. Okay, well, enjoy those proceeds of your sale.
And I tell people who've done that, hey, congratulations. I hope you enjoyed that money, because now you're not going to get paid. I mean, that's the reality. Just put yourself in a buyer's shoes, Mr. Seller. If I show you this business that wink, wink really makes $200,000 a year, but the tax return shows 50, how much are you willing to pay me for it?
Yeah,
you're not. You're gonna look at me like I'm an idiot when I try to sell it for like it's making 200. And so it's a hard conversation to have. And once again, that was the gist of that post, was that, certainly enjoy it, but begin with the end in mind kind of thing.
Begin with the end in mind. We say that all the time. Okay, well, we are coming close to our break point now. I want to give you a chance to plug your properties. I've been putting them up on the screen. I'll put your website up again, but anywhere that you want to direct people who are watching. Thank you. If you're watching this far, thank you for watching. Patrick, I want you to kind of tell people where they can find your content or reach out to you if they need your services.
Yeah, absolutely. I appreciate you having me on here. I've had an incredible time. So thank you so much. We could sit here and talk for hours and people probably wouldn't want to listen. So it's probably good to come to an end at some point. So thank you so much. But my website, you can reach me, my blog's there, my YouTube channel, which you had already promoted. I'm extremely active on Facebook and LinkedIn. And so you can find me on either one of those. And if I can do anything, whether it's broker or business owner, to answer questions, I mean it 100%. Don't hesitate to reach out. I'm happy to do anything that I can. I think, being in business often, it's like being on an island, and it's a scary place to be sometimes. And I've been there, and I'm still there every day. And so if there's something that I can do to make it easier for anybody there to add value, don't hesitate to reach out, and don't hesitate to connect with me on any of those platforms. I'm happy to do anything I can to help.
Love that about you. You heard it here first from an abundance mentality. Patrick Lange, Business Modification Group, the HVAC broker that broke through and got out there with being a subject matter expert, and is reaping the rewards and helping a lot of business owners. Thank you for being here, and we'll get this posted, and we'll keep the conversation going.
Thank you so much, Neal. I had a great time.
You bet.